Prison riots were regular in the US in the mid-20th century. In the Attica prison riot, 43 people were killed.
A major factor was believed to be the brutality of the prison guards. But if this is right, why were they brutal? Do brutal people become guards, or does being a prison guard make you brutal? Stanford University psychologist Philip Zimbardo wanted to find out. And in 1971, he set up the Stanford Prison Experiment, known as the SPE, which would become one of the most famous, some would say infamous, experiments ever conducted in psychology. It's still taught on most psychology programs, and because of all the articles, the TV shows, and the movies about it that followed, it's had a massive influence on how we think about brutality. But how valid is the story the SPE tells us? Well, maybe it's time to go back and take another look.
Summer 1971. Ads in local papers asked for male student volunteers to take part in the study of prison life. 24 students, all with no history of criminal behavior or drug use, were selected, and then randomly allocated to either guard or prisoner roles. Then, the researchers waited. Well, on the first day, nothing much happened. It seemed like a game. But on the second day, everything changed. There was a mini rebellion with the prisoners refusing to leave their cells. The guards struck back with fire extinguishers and removed their beds.
Take your bed and your clothes in prison!
Each day, the guards became more brutal and controlling. The prisoners, more submissive and mindlessly obedient.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
Or in some cases, breaking down. An experiment scheduled to last for 2 weeks had to be ended after only 6 days. But what had happened in those 6 days seemed more than enough to answer Zimbardo's questions.
It seemed to show really dramatically how you can take perfectly ordinary, perfectly decent, perfectly nice people, put them in a role, and you produce this remarkable brutality.
This Jekyll to Hyde transition happened so quickly it seemed almost unbelievable. So, how did Zimbardo explain it?
He argued that if you put people in a role, actually they almost helplessly slip into that role and behave in terms of that role. And he insisted, for instance, that what happened without any training on his behalf. He didn't tell the guards what to do, they just took on the role themselves.
Well, what the SPE seemed to demonstrate so dramatically was the power of situations to transform individuals into the roles they've been given. And this is what generations of psychology students have been taught.
Okay, but how convincing is this explanation?
Well, from the start, some psychologists had doubts about the validity of the SPE, and these doubts began to grow over the years. Some different accounts began to emerge, and there was no replication of the SPE findings.
When professors Alex Haslam and Steve Riker did a replica prison study in the UK in 2002, they got a very different result.
Without clear instructions, the guards were very reluctant to adopt their role, very reluctant to impose their power, very reluctant to be brutal or oppressive. And so the notion they would naturally fall into a brutal role just didn't seem to happen.
So doubts about the SPE were growing. But what finally confirmed them was when the SPE archive was made available. There were almost 1,000 documents and nearly 100 tapes and videos showing how the research was done.
What it showed was that the researchers hadn't been neutral observers of an experiment, but rather had been active participants.
Their life is totally controlled by us.
Advising, guiding, and encouraging the guards to be controlling, and if necessary, brutal.
Zimbardo's address to the guards before the study started is only the tip of the iceberg. That after he spoke, another of the research team spoke, being much more explicit about the things that people could do, and giving them something pretty close to instructions. You know, keep the prisoners on edge, keep them awake at night.
These revelations showing that the SPE wasn't conducted in the way we were told it was has caused some scholars to reject the study entirely. Le Texier subtitled his book on the SPE, History of a Lie, and an article in the American Psychologist ended with, "The Stanford prison experiment was an incredibly flawed study that should have died an early death."
I don't think that's true. I think there are disturbing and powerful phenomena which we need to understand.
Well, whatever we think about the explanation, the brutality of the guards really happened. And the new information about the part played by the researchers just gives us another way of explaining it.
It's clear being brutal was approved of, and that when people behaved brutally, they were congratulated by the experimenters. So throughout, there are clear examples of leadership.
Well, as the word suggests, leadership is about guiding people to want to do something because they think it's worth doing. And this is what happened in the SPE. The guards were brought together and encouraged to see themselves as part of a group, sharing the same good cause as the experimenters. And this is called identity leadership.
In the case of Zimbardo's study, he's trying to get the guards to feel that they identify with this cause of exposing prison brutality. And in order to do that, they've got to act in brutal ways so as to show what the consequences are.
And we can see this in a tape where one of the experimenters is encouraging a guard to identify with the project and take on a more brutal role.
What the experimenter says is, look, we're interested in prison brutality. And we think prison brutality is a terrible thing, and we want to expose it and expose its effects. And I'm sure that's something you believe in as well. And the guard says, yep. So he says, in effect, look, you've got to behave brutally in order to do something which is good, which is progressive, which is a noble cause. To do harm, not because they don't care about it, but because they think they're pursuing a greater good.
The Stanford prison experiment started with the question, do brutal people become guards, or does being a guard make you brutal? Well, it seems it's neither. Looking at the SPE in a new light suggests something more worrying. Just how easy it is to lead people towards brutal behavior once you've convinced them to identify with a group working for a higher cause. Then, brutality and violence can even be something to be proud of.
So the SPE remains a very important study, perhaps even more important than people thought it was.